Welcome to From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Here you'll go from making ends meet behind a keyboard to living in true freedom by using real estate well. Never having to work a full-time job, report to a manager, or give your adult life to a corporation that probably doesn't care about you. We will give you everything you need for your journey: techniques, principles, real-world experience, and application, filtered through 5 key power principles from my book, People Power, Other People's Money, How to Win, Enjoy, and Reserve. Get ready to take notes. Let's jump into From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Welcome to From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. I'm here with my guest today, Andrew Freed. Let me jump right into his intro. He's based out of Worcester, Massachusetts. He's a project manager at a biotech company for 10 years. In just 3 years, however, he went from 0 to 127 units. This guy is also an investor-focused real estate agent and a general partner in syndications. Man, you are clearly been busy. You've clearly been getting your education up. Also, he's been on Bigger Pockets. Andrew, would you like to expand on that introduction, sir?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, like many people here, I found real estate during COVID when I had too much time in my hands and I realized, what am I doing working for somebody else when I can work for myself?
Mhm.
And yeah, found Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then at that point, I went all into like Meet Kevin, Bigger Pockets, podcasts, books, essentially just the Bigger Pockets recipe. I started a real estate meetup, became an investor focused agent, started house hacking. Then I started doing joint ventures. Then I started getting into the syndication space. And here I am today, 3 years later.
Okay, awesome, bro. Thanks for expanding on the introduction. I have so many questions based on that. Namely, I want to explain the acronym in our outline, but I want to, after that, get into the willpower situation. So, but the power acronym, the time together is people power, other people's money or resources, winning, enjoying, and reserve. That's from my book. And so I want to, yeah, just repeat that question. How do you have so much willpower that just went into this real estate and especially in 3 years?
I think at a certain point, when you move up the corporate ladder and you quote unquote achieve the American dream, you realize it's not what it's cracked up to be. It's not the path you truly wanted. And I came to that realization pretty quickly. And rather than doing things about it, I fell into vices like video games or whatever, just anything, sports, anything I could do to take my mind off of it. So, after a long day, I would just go home and like play video games or like do whatever I could to take my mind off my dreams, right? And it came to a tipping point during COVID when I was like, I ran out of stuff to do. You had too much time on your hands, right?
Mhm.
And at that point, I really had to make a change. And I came to the epiphany that I'm like, what's more scary, working for 30, 40 more years or giving it a go, failing and still retiring at 65 or 70 because you have such a long time horizon, right? So
Mhm.
once I came to the realization that I feared more the status quo than the change, then that's when the willpower wasn't even an issue, you know? So it's kind of how I got over it.
So you decided you wanted to take on your last name and get freed.
Yes, I decided I wanted to get freed and, exactly. So, yeah.
That's beautiful, bro. Yeah, there's so many people that just fall into the American dream and working for a corporation like and getting the house. But where times are changing, industries are changing, corporations aren't like decades ago where they care about their people. They mostly care about the shareholder getting that 1% upwards. So it's okay to look out for yourself. A lot of industries are going to get hammers also in the next 5 to 10 years. So to invest is also just to be smart, to get ahead of the curve of what's happening.
I mean, to me, investing is just building. I mean, to truly be a successful investor, you really have to build the better version of yourself every single day. And with that comes the building of abundance resources in the form of assets, right? So that's why I love investing and that's why I love real estate. It's like, it's not even a journey of wealth building, it's the journey of like personal development and personal discovery and kind of becoming the best version of yourself, So it's like, it's kind of has a hidden path laid in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so there's fulfillment there, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. There's only so much fulfillment. Like I also play PS5. There's only so much fulfillment that shooting some terrorists on the Division 2 could give me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into people power. Tell me about the people you've gotten connected with to help you in your investing career.
So I think it all comes down to just like putting yourself out there and telling the world what you want, and the world will give it back to you. And that's exactly what happened to me, in the fact that, like I said, I was looking for mentors. I found Bigger Pockets. Um, it was a huge coach in my life. But I also started to attend local meetups. And one meetup I attended, my mentor hosts these meetups all over Mass, and he hosted a virtual meetup. And at that point, I house hacked a property in Worcester. That was kind of my market. And he brought up, he's like, oh, I'm looking for a venue for a meetup in Worcester. Does anybody know any good venues? And he said that right at the end of the meetup. So at that point, I decided to take that entire weekend to hit up like 6, 7, 8 venues, get their pricing, get their managers' information, get when they could host meetups, and provide all that information, a nice package, and gave it to this guy doing, big deals, hundreds of units of deals. At that point, like, this is great. I've been asking for somebody to do this for 8 months and nobody did it. Like, do you want to be our first guest speaker? At that point, I agreed. I became the first guest speaker, talked about like my first house hack. At that point, he asked me to host the meetup. So from there, I started hosting the meetup, and then I became an agent on his team, and more or less, I went out of my way to provide this guy immense value in the form of, increasing his brand with doing the meetup, in the form of commissions, being an agent under him. Like, technically, I still have a W-2. I don't need the agent commissions, but I more did it to learn under him and to grow, and less so the commissions, right? So I went out of my way to bring this guy immense value. And then at that point, anytime I had a question, or I ran into an issue, I needed a connection or an attorney or a bank or whatever, like, he was a call away. Like, any issue I ran into was a 2-minute conversation with him. So, like, just doing stuff like that, like going out of your way to provide immense value to people, gives you the network of people actually doing what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I found my mentor. And then from there, I kind of started my meetup, became a subject matter expert in Worcester, where I own 30 units now, started focus on the market, started connecting with local banks and partners, found a couple partners, did mastermind, where in this mastermind alone, this one mastermind, I closed 100 deals, 100 units, this one mastermind, because people in that group, we all did deals together, we all brought it together, right? So it's just like, I would say the power of people have been the only reason I've achieved my success.
Yeah. I just thought about this from a beginner's perspective. Like, sure, it may take a while to do what you did, but it'll be worth it. And you could start your own group at the end of it. And people may think, oh, but I don't got enough experience to start my own thing. Well, actually, if you've done, 5 to 10 deals, you probably do, and you could develop from there. Don't let that imposter syndrome take over you. And so, you having a job, I'm excited about that, because you're the first person actually that decided to come on that still is working. Actually, there may have been one other, but could you elaborate on your plan to exit, if you even want to exit? Because some people get fulfillment out of their job.
It is fulfilling. I help scientists do research. I'm like a finance guy, grants guy, so it's pretty fulfilling. However, it's just the restricting factor I'm running into is time. I have so many commitments right now, where I have, I'm an investor focused agent. I self-manage units. I'm a GP in syndication. Oh yeah, I have 127 units to manage. On top of that, I have a W-2, right? So I would say the tipping point for me would be the demand of time. Once the job gets to the point where it demands too much time of me, then I plan on leaving. I mean, my goal was originally, when I started investing, was to retire by 35, and that's about 2 years from now. So the goal would be in 2 years, preferably.
Yeah, it looks like you're on your path to reaching that. Okay. And do you have other plans alongside those things, like an assistant or other partners?
Yeah, I think I have about, I don't know, 6 or 7 people that work for me in one capacity or another. I have 3 virtual assistants, a bookkeeper, a social media virtual assistant, an executive assistant. I have 3 agents under me on my team. And I also have a local assistant property manager who meets contractors, deal with tenant communications, deals with like issues, repairs and things of that nature. So yeah, so I have kind of a team that helps take a lot of this off my plate for sure.
Ah, check that out. So you already gotten ahead of the curve to save yourself time so you can focus on what you want to throughout the day.
Totally. And I mean, virtual assistants, if you're not using virtual assistants, you're missing out. That's the biggest game changer in any business is like you can hire, somebody for 20 hours a week for 100, $150, and they could literally take so much stuff off your plate. It's not even funny.
Yeah, something I'm grateful for my assistant is the tenant or prospective tenant intake, like called intake.
Yep.
I don't have to deal with screening them anymore. Lease agreement write-ups. Oh my goodness. You'd be surprised how many hours that sort of stuff takes out of your week.
Yeah. Or like repairs, like coordinating with a tenant and a contractor to get them in there at a certain time or work for
Yeah.
them, work for them. Like, what's the issue? What's not the issue? Like, just the back and forth communication alone is a lot.
Yeah. And that brings up another point, like structuring a system. So for us, we have a spreadsheet per property. So if we ever need to get access to a contractor and assistant coordinates, so that's important to have a structured system for that. That way, your assistant is not calling you about, hey, contractor's there, come and give them the code, or I'm pulling my hair out, and you're in a meeting or something like that.
Yeah.
What sort of systems do you use?
Your point, I do have like, a password sheet for all of my properties. I do have a contractor Rolodex, a shared Google Doc that has like, 5 preferred vendors for each category, right? It has their contact information. So anybody can take, if an issue comes in, they have a contractor to reach out to. I do a Slack channel and I have each individual property on our Slack channel. I have my assistant, my VAs hooked up to there. I have a CRM that I use for tracking partners, right? Like investing partners. Like I have a monthly newsletter that I send out with my CRM. So I mean, those are kind of some of the systems that I use to help me kind of manage my business. I think I do apartments.com for rent collection and screening, QuickBooks for bookkeeping. Yeah, so I have a lot of systems now that I'm saying out loud.
Yes.
So
Excellent. All right. Well, let's move on to other people's money or resources. What sort of contacts did you use to build private capital or resources like contractors, perhaps?
So in investing, I always recommend before somebody else uses somebody else's money, they should be willing to use their own money and build some credibility and experience with that. And that's exactly what I did. But I didn't have the money. But what I did have was I had equity in my 1-bedroom condo back in Boston. I bought in 2015. I had about 200K in equity. So rather than using my own money, I did a HELOC, a home line of credit, and I used the bank's money and used that $200,000 as seed money to start my real estate investing career in Worcester. And I used that money to house hack 2 properties, to buy an investment property, to invest in a syndication that sold a year later and doubled my money. Then I transitioned that into buying some commercial property, JVing, and then at that point, once I ran out of my own money, but deals were still coming my way. At that point I started syndicating and raising capital, and that's when the bigger deals came across my desk. I didn't have my own money to take it down, but I knew they were great deals, and I decided to start raising private capital for those bigger stuff.
Yeah, and that's you reaching out to banks made me think of it. That's why it's so important to have tracking for this sort of stuff. So the systems, and even if you don't have money for systems like professional accounting software, accountants, bookkeepers, you could track stuff, on a month-to-month basis on a spreadsheet. Keep expense reports, keep rent rolls. So when you do go to apply for a loan or refinance, like a multifamily property, you have all that information just ready to go instead of pulling your hair out. Oh God, I gotta go get all this information in one swoop. And it can be overwhelming, especially if you're going to apply to 3 different banks to try to get the best rates. All of them are going to have different applications, different forms. But the one commonality is if you're ready, you'll have all the data in one place. So you can just copy and paste. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right? The refinances, the work with lenders is a whole doozy.
And once you start getting more than a couple properties, like having updated books is incredibly important because everybody always asks you for your updated balance sheet, your updated profit and loss statement for every property. And if you have like 10 properties and you aren't up to date on books, that's like 200 hours of work, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I always recommend to new investors, at least have your system set up like initially, right? Like at least sign up to like a accounting software that feeds in your charges, and every single month you go down there and you categorize it, right? But set up your systems up front, because it's if you start accumulating assets and you don't have systems, it's going to be like herding cats. It's headache, and yeah. So I thankfully still have my hair because I did systems early on. But to your point, I was my own bookkeeper, right? I was my own virtual assistant. Like I didn't hire that out. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's a process too for finding which one works best for you. So once you find it, just stick with that. I know you're enjoying that content, but I just wanted to personally invite you to the Commonwealth Affordable Housing Fund. If you want to passively earn while also building communities, doing philanthropy even, while getting quarterly distributions and even sharing in the exit about 5 years down the line, then please join us. This used to just be for friends and family, but you could join in now. You could be essentially earning through an expert, which is I, running the investment firm Commonwealth. So if you want to be a part of it, and also get access to exclusive events where we go to in-progress construction and I show you how your money is being used actively and how the renovation was just complete and how this is going to help change people's lives, how we negotiated an acquisition. So you could be a part of those events throughout the year and also earn passively. So if you want to be a part of that, please click the link below and I'll let you back to your awesome content. Thanks. All right. Well, other people's money resources, I definitely like that advice too of, do your own stuff first. That way you know what you're doing when it comes to managing other people's money. And hopefully the surprises will be less too. Therefore, the risk of losing other capital's money or other private capital's money is thereby offset.
I'll give you one more tip. When it comes to raising private capital, it's all about being trustworthy and whether people like and trust you. Right? Like that's the biggest thing in my book. So what has helped me tremendously in that is just being extremely ethical and doing it over a long period of time and having a large network, right? Because people invest in people they like and trust, and with that comes people who are ethical, right? So I think just that's key, and that's something people should take into account. I mean, on many different occasions, yeah, maybe I could have saved a few bucks in something, but I made it right because I know in the long run, it serves you right if you have that sort of mentality.
That's good. And so long as we're talking about ethics, I also could bring up two concepts that us as real estate agents know, but perhaps the public doesn't. So there's two key aspects to think about when it comes to ethics. There's disclosure and then damages also. Damages being the worst case scenario, obviously. But disclosure is just being upfront, as fast as possible. Like if I'm gonna miss a target on a distribution for my fund, I'm gonna let them know, as fast as possible. Like, hey, we have X amount of vacancies more than we anticipated, so in our next distribution, it may be affected. So disclosure is important in that sort of scenario, maybe exits. But in the worst case scenario, damages. How could somebody get emotionally, financially, otherwisely hurt? Trying to get ahead of potential damages could prevent you from getting sued in the future. And thereby, it also comes back to disclosure, like being able to forecast things ahead of time, making sure people understand if they're going to invest in your fund. Like, hey, no investment in the world is guaranteed, but here are our variety of strategies, our exits, our plans, so you're fully informed. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Oh, Andrew, you're kind of hard to hear there. Well,
right now?
Oh yeah, that's better.
I was saying that, I mean, that's a really, those are some really good points because everybody talks about ethics, but like, what is that, right? And
Yeah.
you said perfectly when it comes to transparency and making it right? Like if you have transparency, if you're authentic, and if you when you make an error, if you say, I messed up, I'm gonna make this right, like that goes very far.
Yeah. There was this one thing I learned. I used to run a sales business, and like you, I managed about a dozen people for a sales real estate aspect. And obviously, with that sort of sales team, a lot of turnover, and it was investment property, which only amps up the turnover because investment property is, short term, super high risk. In this case, fix and flip, right? It's not a rental property, which is lower risk in my opinion. So the intensity for that business was much higher. And I ran that for about 2 years. I had a business partner, and that business partner was not exactly the best at confronting issues. Let's just put it that nicely. And so I had to come in at times and talk to the seller like, hey, this is not going down because X, Y, and Z. And there was conversations that I didn't want to have, but I had to tell myself, hey, if you're not picking up this phone to call them or picking up this phone to answer their call, you have to answer their call or call them right now. Like it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but they would rather know that the property is at risk of not closing versus not.
Yeah, I mean, and the more you sit in uncomfortability, the easier it gets, right? So the more and more and more times you did those calls, the easier they got, I'm
Yeah,
sure, right? So a
exactly.
lot of times you got to confront that, and a lot of times when you get that feeling like you restrict and you cringe at doing something, like you should want to do it more.
Yeah,
Gotta want to make you grow. So
exactly. Yeah, having the courage. So let's go into the next section, winning. And courage involves winning even in the midst of like learning from a failure too. What's an example of learning from a failure that made you win and get fulfillment out of that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is closing on my first syndication. So my buddy brought me this deal. It was a 65 unit portfolio in New Bedford, Mass. And we were getting a fantastic price per unit. It was an estate sale. We were walking into $1 million in equity. It was a great deal, right? Underperforming asset. The property conditionally was in great shape. So at that point, we need to raise about $1.8 million. So he brought it to me and my partner. He's like, oh, can you guys raise this money? And in the back of my mind, like, I didn't know I could, to be honest with you, but I told him, yeah, I mean, absolutely, we can raise the money, right? So push comes to shove. 2 months later, we're at about like a mil or 1.1, and we're getting pretty dangerously close to to close
Mhm.
time.
Oh yeah,
And at that point, I think I really had to accept my failure that we couldn't do it and call for help. And at that point, I ended up getting in contact with my mentor, and he ended up raising the remaining amount. We obviously gave him equity for that, right? But I think it's important to realize where you fail and then when you need to ask for help because we end up closing on that deal and it was a great deal, right? And yeah, we gave up equity, but I'd rather have some of something than 100% of nothing all day, right?
exactly. And if you notice, if you read between the lines what he just said, he put his ego to the side. He said, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to follow through on my word. I'm not going to just be like, oh, in my feelings, I only got 1.1. This is stupid. Oh, I'm down on myself. It's everybody else's fault. you know, he just worked it out. He was vulnerable. He reached out to his mentor and he put his ego to the side. So awesome example of that, Andrew. Um, okay, well, enjoying. How do you enjoy what you've built?
I'm working on that because, as you know, when you achieve a lot, achieving or being a workaholic becomes addicting, right?
Yeah,
So I am working on that. I am working on that. I think I got a golfing coach recently. I've been traveling more. Got a fitness coach, so I'm definitely working on that. But it's hard to not be productive. It's hard to just sit down and relax and not be working on one of my many businesses. To be honest with you.
yeah, that's true. We gotta make time for it though, because we're doing it for our friends and family, right? To spend more time with them and get joy out of our own lives too.
I
Um,
totally agree with you.
yeah. Um, Reserve. Oh, you know what? I did want to add to that. Remember how I mentioned the 2 year sales business? Man, my quality of life was horrible in that time. I was waking up in a cold sweat. So I'm glad I gave up that business and focused all in on the affordable housing multifamily because that really gives me more time and more quality of life. Um,
That's great.
but going into the last section here, reserve, there's many different aspects of reserve. There's emotional, financial, spiritual, probably a whole lot more. What's the most recent reserve that you've invested upon?
I would say I joined a program called Go Abundance, which is a mastermind program. And it's all about just like creating the best version of yourself. So you meet a group, 4 or 5 people, you every week or every other week, you go over like your highs and your lows, your goals, your family goals, your relationship goals, your work goals. And you kind of more or less just kind of like enhance your life on a daily basis. And that has been a game changer for me is like constantly, being intentional about, where my life goes. Like, oh, I want to go on a hike with my family, or, I should have, go out to dinner with my brother once a quarter, or, just putting it down on paper and following through. To your point, kind of, you have to be intentional about having fun. You can't just expect it to happen, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so I would say that's been a game changer for me.
Yeah, just scheduling it is a game changer too. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint like beautiful moments in life, but if we schedule something to set up the intention, it could be awesome. There was a trip that ex-girlfriend of mine went on to Italy, and I wanted to just work, but that was like, okay, fine, I'll go with you. All grumpy grumps, and just 1 2 minute section of the trip paid for the entire trip, and I probably would have paid a whole lot more. And it was just the moment when I was walking from a tunnel, a pedestrian tunnel, up to the cliff, and this led to a street. And on this street, of course, the beautiful view of the ocean, where the ocean doesn't end into the sky, it's amazing. And then just looking at that in awe, and then a street pianist starts playing, and I'm just brought to my knees and getting the bubbly eyes, like that moment paid for the entire trip and more. So if we schedule time to disconnect and stuff like that and enjoy, it could definitely prove to add another moment to your beautiful life.
Yeah, hey, why are we working so hard so we can enjoy this life, right?
Indeed. Awesome, bro. Well, those were great, succinct ways to cover every one of the points. Is there any other tidbits you want to share?
I would say um, that the one thing that has helped me really achieve success is removing the ego, not being a know-it-all, and being extremely accountable. Like if somebody messes up on my team, it's not their fault. It's my fault for not teaching them correctly or not going about it the right way, right? So I think once you kind of take that mentality on of just self-ownership, I think your life will be a whole lot more fulfilling.
Indeed. That's good stuff, man. Um, I did want to ask you, especially for somebody else that is working a job too, what does your routine look like day to day?
So I do the miracle morning. I practice the miracle morning. I don't know if your audience is familiar with that, but it's the acronym SAVERS: S for silence or meditation, A for affirmation, V for visualization, E for exercise, R for reading, or S for scribing or journaling. So every single morning I get up around 5:36, depending on how many times I hit the snooze. Because and then at that point, I get up and I do my morning routine, right? And it really sets me up for the day because it kind of like gets my mentality in the correct manner. I kind of journal what I'm looking to get done that day to get me closer to my goals. And then I probably get done with that around 8, 9 a.m. And then at that point, I kind of focus on getting my W-2 work, completed. And then at that point, I tackled my real estate goals. So that's kind of my day in a nutshell. And it's a lot more into that, but yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay, awesome. So definitely invest into the Miracle Morning book so you could explore what that looks like. Another portion of that involves making sure you go to sleep on time so you can get up early on time too. So protecting the nighttime situation. When I was doing premarital counseling, the couple that taught us, and they were married for like 30 years. They said at 9 o'clock, it's only a husband and wife in the bedroom time. If the kids come and knocking, they're gonna get a talking to, and that means some discipline. So after 9, the kids know, don't ever come here. And a protection of that nighttime is important too, because it'll set you up for, like what you said, having the Savers morning routine, whatever it may be to you. Yeah. So be protective of your time. And with that, we'll wrap up. How good people get in touch with you, and what sort of stuff are you doing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for being on this show. Thank you very much. So they can find me at Investor Frida on Instagram, or Andrew Freed on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I'm always putting out multifamily tips. And then if anybody's interested in multifamily around Worcester, Mass, that's me and my team focus in that area. So feel free to reach out.
Excellent. You guys getting snow up there already?
Thankfully, no. I'm still figuring out my snow vendor, so I'm praying that we don't get snow. So,
I'll pray alongside you, bro.
thank you.
Excellent. Well, that wraps up another episode of From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for joining us on another episode of From Tech Developer to Real Estate Developer. I hope you got a lot of return on investment for your time today, and I encourage you to share it with other people so that they could also get returns with this valuable education to invest in real estate. We're also sharing this free education because we want to help people learn how to invest so that they could also create more affordable housing units. We have a great goal of creating 2.5 million affordable housing units by 2047, and free education like this is a big part of that. So by you sharing, you are a part of the equation to create those affordable housing units. So I can't wait to see the end of the road that we're going to achieve together. Have an amazing and blessed day.